Hey, taxpayers. Remember how thousands and thousands of Canadians want the CBC to be defunded? Yeah. So Taxpayers Federation and our supporters, we think that the CBC is a huge waste of money. We're pointing out the fact that next to nobody is watching this thing in Canada anymore, and the ethical conflict that journalists should not be paid by the government. Those are three huge issues, okay? And very good reasons why the state broadcaster, why government-funded media CBC needs to be defunded. If folks love the programming on CBC, that's awesome. They should choose to pay for it themselves. We said all of this at the Heritage Committee when we testified about defunding the CBC. Here's a clip. We are here to speak for thousands of hardworking taxpayers who want to defund the CBC. This needs to happen for three important reasons. The cost of the CBC. Nearly nobody is watching the CBC, and journalists should not be paid by the government. Okay, so that was back a couple of months ago. And apparently, the Heritage Minister has been listening to Canadians, and now she's come forward with her recommendations. And, doesn't sound like she was listening that hard, because she's recommending that the government increase the funding to the CBC. In fact, it sounds like she wants to increase the funding of the CBC up to about $2.5 billion per year. Yeah, to increase the funding the CBC already gets by more than $1 billion a year. To put this kind of money into perspective, about $2.5 billion, that kind of money could cover the grocery bills of more than 150,000 Canadian families for a year. So the CBC is a huge waste of money. Next to nobody is watching the CBC. If you check out their own latest quarterly report, their primetime audience share for CBC News Network is a 1.7. Put another way, that means about 98% of Canadians are choosing to not watch the CBC at that time frame, in prime time. Their ratings for their supper hour newscasts, like the 6 o'clock local news, are so small, city by city, that they're almost impossible to measure now. They're gone. They've fallen off a cliff. So it's a huge waste of money. Next to nobody is watching it. And yes, it's obviously a conflict of interest for journalists to be paid by the government. Journalists are supposed to hold the powerful to account. Pretty hard to do that when you're counting on the powerful government for your paycheck. There's another element here that the minister is recommending. She's saying that we should remove the CBC's funding from the budget system, meaning the $1.4 billion that they get right now per year, that should all be scrubbed from the budget. That shouldn't show up in any way in budget documents. No, she's saying it should be baked into legislation and into statutes so that it automatically is there. And members of parliament don't get to parlay about it. They don't get to debate it, and they don't get to vote on the thing. What are we paying them to do there if we're just going to automatically give money to the CBC, automatically improve its pay hikes to the CBC? Like, this is pretty out there. Another element that the minister brought up at this press conference, and I want you to listen to this. This is a clip. She's basically saying that the CBC, or an entity like the CBC, should be deciding what is true and not. That it should be in charge of fact-checking what we can see, hear, and share to decide whether or not it is disinformation or propaganda. Listen to this.
Enshrine in law the role that CBC Radio-Canada plays in the fight against disinformation to support the public, especially in the current context. And this refers directly to some of the recommendations that were made by the Foreign Interference Commission, which repeated how important it is that Canadians can rely on Canadian sources of information to be more resilient and to understand the patterns that other countries use to disseminate propaganda or disinformation to influence how we live together and our political context. And this is why I propose to anchor in CBC Radio-Canada's mandate its role in helping the Canadian population fight against disinformation and understand fact-based information.
So again, that was the Heritage Minister saying she wants to open and alter the mandate of the CBC away from news to truth testing. That was a weird one. I'm going to leave you with this because it got my dander up pretty good. So you know how we were saying that lots and lots and lots of Canadians want to defund the CBC, okay? They think it's a huge waste of money, very few people are watching it anymore, and it's a conflict of interest for journalists to be on government payroll. This minister said that if you want to defund the CBC, you can't say that you love Canada. Listen to this.
Supporting our public broadcaster is not a question of the political left or right. It's not a liberal or a conservative issue. It is, above all, a commitment to ourselves, our culture, and our independence. You cannot say you love Canada and yet pledge to destroy our public broadcaster that is central in telling the stories of our country.
I know lots of people in my immediate friend circle and family circle who love this country today and want to defund the CBC. It is not up to the Heritage Minister to decide who does and does not love this country based on whether or not we want to keep paying for the CBC. I will point out that Heritage Minister's salary is fully funded by you, the taxpayer. She is paid about $300,000 per year with a huge expense account. So, just saying, culture does not come from government, and the government does not get to tell you what to think about whether or not you should defund the state broadcaster. Folks, share this video, and if you want to defund the CBC, join the taxpayer army. Head on over to our website, taxpayer.com. Sign the petition to defund the CBC and defund the media. That's how we can help you stand up and be heard.